the instinct for truth and lies. What improvements could you make towards your material success? Achievement, knowing how to make the best use of what you've invested in. Pulses of knowing that could bring unique solutions, or a monkey mind that you just can't shut off. What's really worth knowing? These are all pressures and questions that this cycle of the Human Design Weather for October 30th until November 5th, 2025 will bring. Plus, we have a nodal change this cycle, which is always big news as it brings a shift to what's happening in the environment, and because these also tend to be longer term transits. Hello, and welcome to the Human Design Weather or Not podcast with me, Margot Fraser. Happy Halloween, happy Samhain to those who celebrate. Well, let's start delving into those little hints that I gave you in the opening there and see what's happening in this cycle. It all starts on October 30th at 1:17 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, going until November 5th at 3:11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Yes, for those of us in North America, we've got a time change coming up this weekend. Universal time coordinates, it's coming in October 30th at 7:17 p.m., going until November 5th at 10:11 a.m. Remember to convert that to your own time zone so you know when it starts and ends for you. We always start with the Sun-Earth activations because that's 70% of the conditioning field. We have the Sun moving into gate 44, the gate of Alertness, also called coming to meet. This trait is in the Splenic center, our most primal awareness center associated with survival, health, and well-being. It's part of the tribal circuitry that always has an underlying theme of mutual support. And this particular trait is part of the entrepreneurial side of the tribal circuitry that is all about bringing in the resources that the tribe needs. And think of the tribe as being your family, your community, business, all the different groups that you may be part of. Specifically, this trait is part of the continuous improvement process. When you're making an improvement, it means there's going to be change and you have to get people on board with it. There's an instinct, a nose that this trait brings for what improvement to make, how the change can be made, what framework needs to be put in place to get it done, and who can help sell the change while honoring that framework and being loyal. This is the opportunity that this trait brings. Biologically, this is the trait of the nose. It points to gate 26, the trait of the egoist in the ego center, the heart center, our willpower center. This egoist is the one that can help sell the change and can be both the great truth teller and the great liar. You might get a real sense with this gate 44 activation for who's telling the truth and who's not, who's got a healthy ego and really believes what they're selling, or who's trying to pull the wool over your eyes. The framework that's needed for that change, that's the way of organizing. And organizing is inherently hierarchical, right? One thing has to be placed above the other per se. How are you going to organize things? Not everyone is going to climb to the top level of the business. Not everybody can be the CEO or the president. And again, the business here could be the organization, a group, a community, just as examples. But ultimately, this trait really has an instinct for instilling a sense of self-worth to those within that community or that business or organization, regardless of where they are in the hierarchy. Its keynote says the success of any interaction is based on the absence of any precondition. This trait's in the splenic center. It operates in the now. So there's no precondition. It brings the instinct in the moment to recognize that correct ego. The caution here is that when you put any framework in place and need to make a change, there are always going to be people who are resistant to that. If you try to people please or compromise that framework that you really know is correct, you may not achieve the desired outcome. Every splenic gate carries a primal fear. And here it's the fear of the past, the fear of extinction. If you don't continuously improve, especially in the business sense, you'll be surpassed by others and the business could stagnate or fail. So it's a motivating fear, as long as it doesn't turn into overwhelm or making not self decisions out of it rather than following your strategy and authority. Now, gate 44 is being grounded in the Earth's position. Gate 24, the gate of rationalizing, also called the return. This is in the Ajna center, our mental awareness center. It's part of the individual circuitry that operates in a pulse of knowing and wants to bring through mutation, something new. That's the whole essence of the individual circuitry. Its keynote says the natural and spontaneous process of transformation and renewal. Since the knowings operate in a pulse, one moment it's not there, I don't know, and the next moment you can know it. You transform the pressure to know into a new knowing or not in this trait. It brings the awareness to struggle for knowing or not. This is worthwhile struggling for. This is also not just about recognizing what is knowable. It is also about whether you should struggle for that knowing or not. The individual mind wants to know that whatever knowing has come in is really something new. So the mind has to get busy in its process of going through and comparing, right? Doing this comparison process to other things that you know to make sure that it really is something new. That takes some time. So it can be a real busy mind with this activation. You have to resolve whether it's knowable, whether it's worth knowing and we're struggling for, or not. This is not a value to know. Is it really original and new? That's the bottom line here. This is a mind that will crave silence. There's nothing to know right now. Everything's good. The potential opportunity is that a new knowing may pulse through. This trait can result in a lot of philosophical conversations or conversations on more esoteric subjects out of the mainstream, which can be quite enriching. The caution is getting caught up in wasting time and energy on trying to know something that's not of value or isn't knowable at all. With this trait, you may want to be prepared to take down or jot down any notes or use a voice recorder for any knowings that do come through, because they will leave as fast as they came in. You know, in our vanity, sometimes we think, oh, I'll remember that. And then a minute later, it's like, oh, what was that? There is the potential when that knowing comes through to bring a new solution to a problem. When we look at these Sun-Earth positions together, there could be a pulse of knowing that enhances your ability to achieve the needed change and required framework. Or the mind could be so busy going over past failures that you're not present to that instinctive knowing and information that's available to support achieving the needed change and in turn the needed resources. A knowing of how to best utilize the things that you've invested in or the people that you've invested in is part of this energy as well. Okay, let's move on to our channels now. When the transit field creates a channel, everyone that doesn't already have it in their chart is receiving activation of the related traits and qualities. Now, we have a medium-term channel that came in towards the end of last cycle, and it's going to be with us until November 4th at 3:49 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. UTC, that'll be with us until November 4th at 10:49 p.m. We had Mercury move into gate 34, the trait of power in the sacral center, connecting with Uranus position, gate 20 in the throat center. Together, they create the channel of charisma, a design where thoughts must become deeds. This is an action-taking channel. It's an individual channel that brings the power to take action and be busy. Ideally, it's about being self-absorbed in something that you love. This is individual, and it's part of what we call integration. It's meant to be more self-absorbed. When you see someone who's really self-absorbed in what they love, it can be very charismatic. We typically call this the channel of busyness. It's gate 57, though, in the splenic center, the trait of intuitive insight that gives the awareness to this channel. So if you don't have that gate 57 in your own design, there will be the tendency, as long as this is present, for being busy for the sake of being busy and not necessarily using that vital life force energy of the sacral center on what's truly of value. Also, it's kind of interesting to recognize that all the babies that are born in the period that this channel is active are going to be manifesting generators. So we have a whole, 5 days there of manifesting generators being born into the world. Lots of life force energy coming into the world. Busy people they're going to grow up to be. All right. The other big thing that's happening this cycle is that we have a nodal change. So this is going to come in on November 3rd at 4:22 a.m., going until December 22nd at 9:41 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. UTC, that's coming in November 3rd at 11:22 a.m., going until December 23rd at 4:41 a.m. Now, this change in the nodes of the moon will have us moving out of gate 22, the trait of grace and disgrace in the emotional center that brought this moody being open or being closed socially, being graceful, polite, or rude. And the 47, the trait of realization and oppression in the Ajna center that really has the mind working on putting the puzzle pieces together to make sense of experiences and of life itself. When the nodes change, we're going to be moving into the collective gates in the head center. The head center is a pressure center. It's the pressure to think, and it brings questions to inspire that thinking, right? It's bringing pressure to the ajna. Through that, there's a potential for raising consciousness. The nodes are all about what we see around us, what's in our environment, and our trajectory. We have the North Node moving into gate 63, the trait of doubt. This is part of the mental logic circuitry that's all about trying to find the patterns to carry us into the future. This is part of the scientific mind that's suspicious about the patterns, the formula, the methods that are out there in the world, and questions them. I don't think this is working the way that we thought it did, or I don't think this is working anymore and isn't going to carry us into the future. The mind, humans, we're always looking for certainty. So it brings a pressure to look into things more deeply and delve into the details, get the facts when there is uncertainty. So it brings a pressure to find an answer to those doubts. Its keynote says, in the spiral of life, all endings are beginnings. This actually gives a tie into the abstract side of the collective circuitry that's about cycles of beginnings, middles, and ends, and also speaks to the finite nature of patterns and formulas and methods. They don't tend to work forever, and new patterns and methods emerge over time. Although it's meant to be externally facing, looking and being suspicious at the patterns that are out there in the collective, it can also turn inwardly and bring self-doubt. The South Node is moving into gate 64, the trait of confusion. This is part of the mental abstract circuitry that's all about making sense of our experiences and making sense of life itself. This is the trait that stores images. And those images need to be sorted like a big puzzle. It's like having multiple puzzles sitting up there in the head center. But coming with these puzzle are all sorts of extraneous pieces that don't fit at all, don't have any value, and need to be filtered out. Out of the confusion of this process comes questions. Its keynote says transition like birth requires determined strength for the passage through. Making sense is not an easy process. And in that keynote, it speaks to determination, which actually links it over to the logic side of the collective circuitry and the determination needed to go through the experimental process. There's always a link between the abstract and the logic. One always wants to eventually become the other. Through experiences, patterns emerge, and as the patterns are established, new experiences will test them. They're both collective gates, once again, so there's going to be a strong theme while these are present of impersonal sharing our confusions and sharing our doubts and the questions that arise out of those. We're going to see this confusion and doubt around us. This is in the nodes again. It's in our environment. There are going to be lots of questions. And with that, there is the potential to be inspired. And as I mentioned earlier, for consciousness to be raised or not. This is going to be a relatively short period that this nodal configuration is in place. It's only here for about 1.5 months. Typically, the nodes are usually with us for about 3 months. So this one's going to go by much faster. I'll go more into the detail of the 6 line qualities that they'll start in when we get to the long-term transits. Okay, we've got 3 channels being created by transits of the moon this cycle. So they're just little samplers since the moon only activates a gate or a trait for about 10 or 11 hours, give or take. First up, coming in on November 3rd at 9:29 a.m., going until 6:32 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. UTC, that's coming in November 3rd at 4:29 p.m., going until November 4th at 1:32 a.m. We have the moon moving into gate 51, the trait of shock in the ego center, the heart center. It's connecting with gate 25, the trait of the spirit of the self, of innocence and universal love, being activated by Neptune in the G center. That's the center that's associated with love, identity, and direction in life. Together, these gates create the channel of initiation, a design of needing to be first. This is an individual channel that brings the pressure, the frequency to have us go through initiations into the unknown, something new. It's really about stretching our boundaries, our self into our unknown potentials, getting to know ourselves through that in a deeper way, which in turn can really help to center us within ourselves. This is part of the centering circuitry. It brings an opportunity also to learn how to adapt to shock. However, what we most often see out of that design of needing to be first is being highly competitive with others rather than being competitive in a way with ourselves. Okay, next up, we have coming in November 4th at 3:31 a.m., going until 12:26 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. UTC coming in November 4th at 10:31 a.m., going until 7:26 p.m. The moon moving into gate 3, the trait of ordering in the sacral center, connecting with its electromagnetic, gate 60, the trait of limitation, being activated by Pluto in the root center. Together, they create the channel of mutation, a design of energy that fluctuates and initiates. This is the format channel for the individual circuitry that can bring through a pulse of mutation, but we have no control over when or if that pulse is going to come through. Here we have the old represented by gate 60 meeting the new of gate 3. If that pulse does come through, there is the potential to break out of the limitations of the old and into something new. And that's going to bring the need to reorder things. It's going to bring some chaos. But that vital energy of gate 3 can work through that and get things back into order. So there is the potential opportunity for something new to come through. Again, just keep in mind you have no control when or if that's actually going to happen. And even if that pulse does come through, you've got to put it through your own strategy and authority to determine what that next step is to take and whether it's correct for you. Last up, coming in November 4th at 12:26 p.m., going until 9:18 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. UTC, that's coming in November 4th at 7:26 p.m., going until November 5th at 4:18 a.m. The moon is moving into gate 27, the trait of caring in the sacral center. We just saw that in our last cycle there in the sun's position, and it's connecting with its electromagnetic gate 50 in the splenic center. Together, they create the channel of preservation, a design of custodianship. I think this is actually the first time this year that we've had this channel. It's part of the tribal defense circuitry, and here it's about looking after our offspring. The other part of the defense circuitry is about making more of us. It's all survival of the species. We've made them, now we've got to look after them and help them to become self-sufficient. It can extend, though, to not only caring for offspring, but caring for other things like animals, the environment, projects, a business, and so on. And it's rooted in caring for yourself. What values and nurturing are needed to allow thriving? This is the pressure and opportunity that it's going to bring. It's also the sacral work center connected with the splenic health and well-being center. So there's an inherent pressure while it's present to also work on your health and well-being. That brings us to our long-term transits. The long-term transits are created by the outer planets and the nodes of the moon. They're with us for longer periods of time, years in some cases. So your not self mind could start to think that they're part of you, even when it's not something that you have in your own design. We have two big changes for the long-term transits this cycle. First is that nodal change on November 3rd that we've already talked about. And then close to the end of the cycle on November 4th, we have Uranus moving from gate 20, the trait of the now, to gate 8, the trait of contribution. At the start of the cycle, though, we're still going to have the north and south nodes of the moon sitting in gate 22, the trait of grace or disgrace in the emotional solar plexus center, and 47, the trait of realization and oppression in the Ajna center. And they're sitting in line 1. Once again, the nodes are about what we see in the world around us, what's there in our environment. So we see the politeness and rudeness that's in the world, the attentiveness and lack of attention to each other, the moodiness and being open or closed to being social. And we see people trying to make sense of what's going on, to understand what didn't work, to improve on for the future. Or people trying to make sense of things to figure out who to blame, which can bring this kind of victim mentality. So that's what we may have been noticing in the environment while these are present in this line 1. On November 3rd at 4:22 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, 11:22 a.m. UTC, we have the shift that we talked about already into gate 63, the trait of doubt, and 64, the trait of confusion in the head center. Now, these will be in line 6. The nodes always go through the lines in from 6 down to 1 instead of the usual 1 up to 6. And 6 lines always have a sense of the full circuitry. They want to see the full circuitry achieved. They're also looking to go beyond. For 63, line 6 is called nostalgia, and it says the good sense to avoid turning the previous struggle into an obsession. The logic of leaving old doubts behind, that's its exaltation. The detriment says revolutionary nostalgia, illogic, and the potential obsession with old suspicions and doubt. 63 is the pressure to get an answer. And the sixth line sees the whole circuitry, and it can look back and remember when it got a really good answer, when that circuitry was fulfilled. In the exaltation, yes, you got this really good answer. Oh, and that was so great then. Line sixes, they don't get often really great answers, but you can let it go still. You see, yep, at that time, that was a great answer. But in the present, let's stay present to what is now. And there's always the opportunity then for a new answer, a new pattern. In the detriment, though, it's really holding on to this old answer. There's a tendency when anyone comes up with something new, a new way, to be like, the indigenous people figured that out years ago. Oh, the ancient Egyptians, they already knew that. My grandma told me that a long time ago, right? There's really going back to an old answer over and over again, living in the nostalgia of it instead of being able to let it go. I think about in the US, like Make America Great Again slogan. What's the again? We can never go back. But with the detriment, there's all this belief that back then, sometime, whenever that was, it was a better time. Now, it can bring this being able to see the validity of answers from the past that might be able to be applied to the present and projected into the future, which can be helpful. But more often with this detriment, there's often this getting caught up in believing it was better then, and mentally really having difficulty staying present to what is. For gate 64, line 6 is called victory. And its exaltation says, the mental assuredness that knew that victory was inevitable, thus making triumph sweet, but not reason for excess. The mental gift of enjoying the confusion and its diversity of data. Victory here is making sense, getting that realization. There's a knowing that all the confusion will resolve, realizations will come. So just enjoy the data, the images that come through from the experiences. 6 lines have a theme of trust. And here it's trust in the process. The head center isn't the center responsible for making sense. It just brings the pressure and inspires through that. It's the 47 that we just had actually in the Ajna center that's responsible for the making sense process. So why not just enjoy it? Now, the detriment says, like the story of the Trojan horse, it can be dangerous to get carried away in celebration, lest one loses vigilance and perspective. With all the diversity of data, it's easy to lose perspective. So here it's getting lost in the images coming in, enjoying the confusion and the stream of images so much that why even bother to make sense of them? Why even try to make sense of them? You can see the parallel to the nostalgia of the 63 line 6. And since there's not this wanting to make sense, the impression that you can get if you meet people that have this gate and line is that they're not confused at all and that they know something you don't. But in fact, they're just in the confusion and fine with it, and they don't want it to resolve. So we could have this impersonal sharing when we look at these together of confusions and doubts. And yet, as long as we're in line 6, what may be shared is more about this nostalgia of the past. So you're likely to hear people talking about how much better something was in the good old days, or why even try to make sense of things or of life. So instead of the questions that doubts and confusion can inspire, there's this mentally reliving of the past over and over again and sharing that. Okay, Jupiter, with its quality of expansion, is in gate 62, the trait of detail in the throat center. And this is part of the mental logic circuitry that expresses, I think, or I don't think, backed up with the facts and details. It's sitting in line 5 called Metamorphosis. and has a developmental theme. So it's something we learn about over time that says when excellence is achieved, action is necessary. This is going to bring the pressure to delve into the details and only share with others when all the details and facts are in place and organized. The ultimate purpose is to better conditions for humanity. That's what logic is all about. Let's, get some certainty here. If we do this, we're going to get that outcome. The expansive nature of Jupiter can come through delving into the details. Fifth lines are always projected on that they can provide whatever that trait is. So there's going to be a tendency with this present to project onto each other that, oh, I know you have all the details. Tell me what they are. But it has a developmental theme. It takes time to get all the details and organize them for expression. And there's always the need for fifth lines to manage expectations. So you've got to be able to let people know that, you know what, I don't have the details in place for that yet, even if they're projecting onto you that you do. You've got to manage those expectations. If expectations are not managed, expect to be called out for not having the facts and details that others expected. This is also the trait of naming things. So if you need to come up with a name for something, this is a really helpful quality. Jupiter, again, will be expanding these qualities. Always keep in mind that this is the mental process, and the facts and the details that are expressed may not actually pan out to be true. All right, Saturn with its consequences, its constraints, its limitations, and discipline. It's much more serious type energy. It's in gate 36, the trait of crisis, which is part of the abstract experiential circuitry. Crisis here is not having the experience. It's sitting in line 4 called espionage, and it's a line where we don't have the exaltation present in the world, only the detriment. Now, generally, this particular line is very perceptive of the nature of others. That's built into it. So while it's present, it could bring that ability to you. You just have to watch that you're also still learning about yourself, because you might get so engrossed in the nature of others that something happens that you're not prepared for, that you haven't learned enough about yourself to deal with, which just brings another type of crisis. There'll be a tendency with this particular line to use experience and knowledge that you do have to deal with not having the experience in whatever that new experience is. And the other or others that you're with are going to have to pay for your knowledge in some way. It's not just going to be given away. It fits very well into the capitalistic world. Also with the fourth line, there's always a social aspect to it. Uranus, with its unusualness, its revolutionary nature, and sidetracking qualities, remains in gate 20, the trait of the now, in line 1 called superficiality. It has a developmental theme that says a reliance on shallowness. This line is naturally attuned to what's going on around you in the world, but what gets expressed tends to be superficial, just what you're noticing in the now. However, if you get put in a life and death situation, you could be very clear on what's going on. On November 4th at 3:49 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, Uranus will continue its retrograde motion and move back into gate 8, the trait of contribution, which is another individual trait in the throat center. This is a gate that points to the G center. And it's the individual creative expression of yourself that can emerge through this. It's going to be in line 6 called communion. And I'll get into the details of that one next cycle. Neptune sitting in gate 25. It's been there for a while, continues to be in this trait of the spirit of the self, universal love and innocence, and sitting still in line 2, which is called the existentialist. It also has a developmental theme that says devotion and dedication to the now. This is something we have to learn, to be dedicated to just being in the now. Its exaltation brings the pressure to really focus on what is, rather than what could be or what has been. This is where you find the spirit of yourself in the now, and it can support us in dealing with the unknowns in life. The detriment is staying present to the now, but more out of an ego need to be recognized as selfless, which really isn't selfless at all. And so we don't get that connection, that deeper understanding of the spirit of ourself. Pluto, with its qualities of inner truth and ruling the larger circles, continues to sit in gate 60, the trait of limitation in the root center, and it's in line 6 called rigidity. It can bring a frequency that can help you to accept the limitations that you come up against and not try to push through them unless you see that the mutation, that the real change can happen. Remember, 6 lines really want to know that it can achieve the ultimate expression of that circuitry. Or in the detriment with this, you could feel a real agitation, and it can drop into depression at just feeling limited. You know you have to be restrained, you know you can't push through, but you don't like it. Okay, overall, for most of this cycle, we're going to have that channel of charisma present that's going to bring the energy to be busy, and it may be busy digging into and expressing the details and facts, because we've got that gate 62 active in the throat center as well. So that's going to be amplified by this environment that also brings the pressure to find certainty, right? That pressure of the logic circuitry in the head center, doubting, being suspicious. The strong individuality that we've been seeing for a while now, we still have quite strong individuality, but it is being balanced now by the collective abstract and logic traits, with the pressure to go into a new experience and then make sense of it while staying present to the experience. All of this will feed into the instinct to achieve success through managing the change process, grounded in the potential to know something new that can support success. So there is going to be more of a theme with the sun's position ultimately on resources and trying to gain needed resources, achieving that success. That's what success is for the tribal circuitry, getting those needed resources, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all the levels. Right at the end of this cycle, when the sun and earth move into their 6 lines, we'll also have the nodes in the 6th line, Pluto in the 6th line. We'll have Uranus by that time in gate 8 in the 6th line. So we're going to finish this cycle with strong pressure to know who and what to trust or not, and looking for something beyond what is. Remember that for any of these gates, if you don't have them in your own design, it's just pressure from the transit field. You can observe it playing out around you, you can learn from it, but whether there's anything for you to actually do with it is according to your own strategy and authority. So watch that it's not running you. That brings us to the end of the cosmic weather for this cycle. If you want to run your own chart, you can go to jovianarchive.com. If you're new to human design and you just want to understand the body graph at a high level, what's the black and the red about, the different geometric shapes, a bit of background on the system itself, feel free to grab my free Human Design Basics mini course. It's at margotgfraser.com/human-design. If you enjoy this podcast, I always appreciate it if you give it a like and consider subscribing. All right, well, this is a great cycle to be present to how to use what you've invested in, whether that's people, skills, knowledge, things to achieve greater success. You might find that you're more attuned to smell physically. The odor of things may be heightened, but also the metaphorical, the figurative nose for truth and lies. Expect the pressure to be busy for most of the cycle, but do your best to attune to your own strategy and authority as to what to be busy with. If you have an undefined Ajna center, that second triangle from the top is white in your chart, but you have the electromagnetic present to any of the head, Ajna, and throat gates present in this transit that connect to the Ajna. So that's the 61 in the head center, or if you've got the 17 in the Ajna, and after the nodal change happens, if you've got either the 47 or the 4 in the Ajna, there's going to be the potential for a very, very busy mind, trying to rationalize any knowings that may come in. You might also notice increased fear of the past and not being able to achieve the change needed to gain those needed resources. And there can also be anxiety around having your facts and details challenged. That's part of these frequencies as well. So recognize that these are just not self-interpretations of the frequencies that are present in the transit field. Do your best to let them go or move through them. Have a great cycle, and may you know, love, and live the magic of your true nature. Until next time, bye for now.